Get ready to dive into the life of a legend, Marilyn Monroe. We're going way beyond the glitz and glamour today, using the mysterious life of Marilyn Monroe as our guide. We'll uncover the woman behind the iconic smile. And trust me, even if you think you know Marilyn, there are always more layers to her story to uncover.
What fascinates me most about Marilyn is that her story isn't just Hollywood. It reflects the immense pressures on women back then, especially in the spotlight. And it really makes you think about how much we knew about mental health then, or rather, how little.
It's almost impossible to think of her as anyone but Marilyn.
Right.
But her story starts far from any red carpet. She's born Norma Jean Mortensen. And her childhood, well, it was a far cry from the glamour she'd become known for.
It really shows you the difference between the image of a star and the real person. I mean, we're talking about a really unstable family life when she was young, and her mom had her own struggles too, all before Norma Jean even becomes a teenager.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking when you really think about it. And then, at just 16, she gets married. Not for love or anything like that, but to stay out of the system, to avoid going back. Can you imagine the pressure on a teenager?
And that's where the studio system comes in. That marriage, it's the start of Norma Jean becoming Marilyn Monroe. Even her name, it's not hers really. It's a creation made up by the studio to control her image. And this wasn't unique to Marilyn, not at all. Actresses like Rita Hayworth, her real name was Margarita Cancino, they changed her whole identity, just like that. It's how they fit young stars into a mold, the mold they wanted.
So they really did kind of own them, didn't they? At least the public side of them. So then by the 1950s, Marilyn is everywhere. Gentlemen prefer blondes, some like it hot. She was on fire. But what gets me is how much was going on behind the scenes. I mean, it's like her real life was more dramatic than the movies.
And you can't talk about that drama without talking about Joe DiMaggio. That marriage, as short as it was, it shows you the constant battle between who you are in public and who you are behind closed doors.
Right. You've got Marilyn, the ultimate blonde bombshell.
Yeah.
And Joe DiMaggio, baseball legend.
Yeah.
Used to being in charge. Not exactly a recipe for a peaceful relationship.
Exactly. You have these two massive figures, each at the top of their world.
And clashing, probably.
And that clash definitely came to a head with that subway dress scene.
Oh, come on. That scene is legendary. Even today, that image of Marilyn, dress billowing up from the subway grate. It's burned into everyone's minds. But it caused some serious problems for her and DiMaggio.
Absolutely. Imagine being in his shoes for a second. Your wife's on set, basically being oogled by the world.
I can see why he wouldn't be thrilled.
They say he was furious, and that it sparked a huge fight.
And that it may have even gotten physical later, whether or not that part is true.
It definitely shows you how intense their relationship was.
And honestly, it's probably a relationship that was never going to survive under that kind of pressure, under that kind of scrutiny.
Yeah, and that's Marilyn, isn't it? Always walking that line between the Marilyn everyone saw and the real person. And that line gets even more blurred when you bring in her marriage to Arthur Miller.
It's like the complete opposite of DiMaggio on paper, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have Marilyn, who many saw as the dumb blonde, and she marries Arthur Miller, this intellectual, a playwright. It's like she was trying to change her own story.
On the surface, maybe. Maybe she was looking for something deeper, something more real than Hollywood.
Trying to escape the shallowness.
But it's the 1950s, right? Women, especially in Hollywood, are under enormous pressure to look a certain way, to act a certain way, to fit this mold. And Marilyn definitely felt that. You can see it.
And she must have felt the pressure of that dumb blonde image, right?
Absolutely. Constantly having to prove herself.
Especially next to Miller.
And sources suggest she did, that she felt inadequate around him, like she wasn't on his level intellectually.
It's hard enough being in a relationship, but with that constant pressure, and then to have those insecurities on top of it,
it takes a toll.
It's not surprising that her struggles with medication and alcohol got worse during that time.
Not at all. Think about it. This is the 1950s. We're only just starting to understand mental health as a society. And for women, especially women in the public eye,
forget about it.
Vulnerability was just not an option.
Okay. But we can't talk about Marilyn without mentioning the conspiracy theories.
Right.
I mean, it's like her life is a Hollywood movie in itself.
Yeah.
And it overlaps with one of the most fascinating times in history.
The Kennedys, right.
Exactly.
It's Hollywood and power and secrets all rolled into one.
And then you add in the rumors about her and JFK.
And Bobby Kennedy.
It's like something out of a movie.
Rumors about affairs, cover-ups.
And that performance, Happy Birthday, Mr. President.
Oh, tell me you don't get chills every time you see that clip.
The dress, the way she sang it.
Marilyn just oozed sensuality, and it drove everyone wild.
Especially with all the rumors already swirling around.
Exactly. You can't deny the timing of it all. It just adds fuel to the fire.
It was 1962, the Cold War. Scandals could mean something back then.
Exactly. This wasn't just gossip. This could be a major political problem.
It's like a spy thriller, for real.
And then you add Bobby Kennedy into the mix.
It's like Marilyn is right at the center of all this power, all this secrecy.
Some people even said her behavior got more erratic as she got closer with them.
Almost like she was being used.
And then pushed aside.
It's a classic story, isn't it? Starlet gets involved with powerful men, and it doesn't end well.
Except with Marilyn, you can never be sure what's true.
Exactly. And then there's her death. The ultimate mystery.
On paper, it seems straightforward. August 5th, 1962. Marilyn's found dead in her LA home.
Barbiturate overdose.
That's what they said, at least.
But as soon as you look closer,
Things get murky.
unlocked door, missing phone calls.
Conflicting stories from the people who were supposedly with her.
It's like the perfect recipe for conspiracy theories.
And then you add the red diary into all of this.
The diary.
The one she supposedly kept. Full of details about her and the Kennedys and who knows who else.
And it just vanished.
Disappeared. No one's ever confirmed if it was real or not.
That's crazy. Okay, so how common were overdoses back then in Hollywood? Was it unusual for someone like Marilyn to die that way?
Sadly, no, not really. The pressure, the access to whatever you wanted, it was a recipe for disaster for a lot of stars.
But even still, the circumstances around Marilyn's death, it's hard not to wonder if there was something more to it.
It's like everyone wants to solve the mystery.
Everyone wants to be the one to finally figure it out.
What does that tell you?
That she was more than just a pretty face.
Exactly. She wasn't just a celebrity. She was an icon. And even now, all these years later, her story, her image, it's still everywhere.
You're right, it's hard not to get caught up in it all. The Kennedys, the conspiracies. But we have to remember the real person.
Right. The woman behind the image.
She wasn't just smiling for the cameras. She was struggling.
She was dealing with a lot more than anyone realized at the time. Insomnia, anxiety, depression. And imagine going through all of that with the whole world watching you.
Especially back then, like we were saying before, mental health was barely even a thing people talked about.
And if you were a woman, forget it. You had to be perfect, always.
So when you look at it like that, her dependence on medication, on alcohol,
It's tragic.
but it makes sense in a way.
She was trying to cope, trying to deal with the pressure, the expectations.
In a world that wasn't really offering any other options.
Exactly. There wasn't a support system in place like we have now.
Yeah.
And the pressure on her, on someone like Marilyn, it was constant. Be perfect, be beautiful, be everything to everyone.
It's impossible.
And then there's that last movie.
Something's got to give.
It's like a Greek tragedy almost. All the signs were there.
The missed work, the erratic behavior.
She was falling apart.
And they fired her.
It just goes to show you, fame isn't a shield.
Money can't fix everything.
Exactly.
So where does that leave us?
With more questions than answers, I think.
We may never know what really happened to Marilyn. Or who she truly was behind it all.
But that's part of what makes her so fascinating, isn't it?
It keeps us asking questions.
It makes us want to learn more.
Marilyn's story is tragic.
There's no doubt about that.
But it's also a story of resilience.
And of the incredible power of image. Of how we create these icons. And how those icons sometimes come at a cost.
She was more than just a victim.
Right. She was a force of nature.
A trailblazer in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
I hope so.
And hopefully we've inspired them to dig a little deeper on their own.
There are so many layers to Marilyn's story.
This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. So keep asking those questions.
And keep searching for the truth. Thanks for listening, everyone.